Hello and welcome to this episode of Class is in Session. I'm your host, Ashley Stevens, and this show on Black Enterprise highlights the latest happenings inside HBCU classrooms, public policy issues facing these historic institutions. We also take a look at movers and shakers, students, alum, and leaders at HBCUs who are leading the way in business and the arts and administration. We're excited to have today's special guest, Dr. Valerie Kinloch. She's a longtime higher education administrator at universities across several U.S. cities. She's a proud Johnson C. Smith University alumna who has returned to lead her alma mater, entering her second year this fall. She was named to Education Week's 2023 list of the nation's most influential scholars. She served as president of the National Council of Teachers of English, and she's currently the 15th president of Johnson C. Smith University. Hello and welcome, Dr. Valerie Kinloch.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really good to be with you this morning.
I'm honored to be here. I've absolutely, being a Carolina girl and not far from Charlotte, I know folks that, in the Charlotte area, and everyone has such positive things to say about you. They really, really do.
That means a lot. Thank you for that. And yes, being South Carolina girls and all, and being back in Charlotte, North Carolina is a wonderful thing. So thank you for that warm welcome.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about your welcome. You have just concluded your first full year as president at your own alma mater. Is that right?
That is right. I just finished my first academic year, going into my second year this August, and I'm really excited to be back at my undergraduate alma mater.
That's really exciting. Let's go back to the beginning, because obviously you've had a long career and trajectory in higher education. But let's talk a little bit about your family and upbringing. Tell us where you grew up and about the importance of education, and particularly higher education in your life.
Absolutely. So as you said earlier, I am from South Carolina, born and raised in Charleston, South Carolina. Went to public schools there, had amazing educators who cultivated me, poured into me, and taught me the value of higher education. I have two older brothers. I have many, many cousins, aunts, nieces. But the thing that I hold tight to when I think about my educational journey is my mother and my father. My mother, who is a retired licensed practical nurse, wanted to be a mathematics educator, but wasn't able to do so in the segregated South. And my father, who was a retired truck driver, and who did not graduate from high school for various reasons. And I think about that, and I think about the journey that I've been on, and particularly in higher education, and having a community and family, a network that has always supported me and believed in me, especially when opportunities were not always readily available to them. That has actually motivated me to continue to do good in the world. And higher education has always been important in my family, and especially for me.
I'm sure that had to be a very, very proud moment, or many proud moments for your family, to see you continue to rise and shine across all that you've done in higher education. So kudos to you and to your family for instilling that in you. And Charleston girl, I love to hear it. Well, listen, you're from Charleston, so tell us, how did you decide to attend JCSU for college, for undergraduate studies?
Okay, so this is going to be an interesting one. At least for me, I think it's interesting. I'm a first generation college student, and I have always just loved reading. I've always loved just being in books, thinking about the world, thinking about improving the world. And it was in high school, one of my guidance counselors, Ms. Glares in particular, and a few other educators there at Burke High School in Charleston, South Carolina, said to me, "So what are you going to do when you are finished, when you graduate from high school?" And I've always just loved studying. I've loved the art and the science of studying. And so I saw a pamphlet for Johnson C. Smith University, had no idea where it was, had no idea of its values or its mission vision, and decided to apply to Johnson C. Smith University. I remember the application fee was $25 at the time, and found the money, applied, got accepted, and thought about nowhere else. And I said, I'm going to Johnson C. Smith. They accepted me, gave me scholarship monies, brought me here in the summer to cultivate me, to support me before starting in the fall semester. And that's where it came from. I do not remember applying to any other university. And when I got here in Charlotte and met the faculty and the staff on this campus, I fell in love so deeply that I knew however I got here, I was meant to be here. And that's how my journey started at JCSU.
That is so interesting. And that, it seems almost either serendipitous and or divine that not only that was the only place you applied, it's where you went, it's where you were nurtured, and now you're back to lead. That's
And
really
now
that's really exciting.
I'm back to lead. I'm the 15th president. Like now I am back to where it started. And for me, that's I don't even have the words to describe the feelings that I have when I think about the fact that my office is on the fourth floor of this historic Biddle Hall, and it looks over what we call the block. I see students, I see faculty, I see visitors walking the block all the time. And to think that I used to be a student on the block, shy and nervous and hesitant, and now I get to actually look at the block, go outside, pour into students every day that I see them, and to encourage them that I remember when, and I remember questioning myself, but you don't have to question yourself. You can have your dreams, you can make those dreams reality, and you can be here at JCSU. It is a beautiful feeling to be back and to support students and others here.
I love to hear that. Here with Dr. Valerie Kinloch, the 15th president of Johnson C. Smith University. Dr. Kinloch, as you were once a JCSU student, tell us now, what are some things that you are learning or leaning into as a leader that you're able to work on or have a vision for that you realize, hey, when I was a student, this was important to me. So it may be important to students who are here today.
So I've been thinking a lot lately about the value of the liberal arts. I came to Johnson C. Smith University in 1992 to study chemistry. And I've always loved English, I've always loved literature. And so I studied chemistry and English and decided to major in English. And
Mhm.
so when I graduated with a degree in English in 1996, I always knew that here at Johnson C. Smith University, the value of the liberal arts, and it's not just the liberal arts that teaches you how to read and write, it is how to make sense of the world, how to engage with other human beings in the world, whether the world is here in Charlotte or across the globe. And so, one of the things I've been leaning into is really thinking about an interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary approach to who students are and how we study. A student can major in business administration, but could also minor in something like English. That should be an option. A student can be invested in STEM, but also want to think about dance and music and creativity, and that should be allowed. It should be cultivated. And so, since I've returned, I've been thinking about this motto of a new era of excellence. What does it mean to focus on Black excellence? What does it mean to cultivate Black identities? What does it mean to say that if you choose a place like Johnson C. Smith University, you will be fully embraced, your identities will be fully supported, and you will be able to study and dream and imagine beyond anything that you've ever thought before. And that's what we do here. And so I'm thinking about academic programs. I'm thinking about student-centered learning. I'm thinking about the historic West End, the community where Johnson C. Smith University sits, and our social and moral responsibility to work with and alongside community partners. I'm thinking about what is the mark that Johnson C. Smith University can leave and have a sustaining impact on the lives of other people, because that's why we're here, to improve lives and to leave communities and the world fundamentally better than we found it. And so those are some of the things that I've been thinking about since being back.
Interesting. You mentioned a new era of excellence, and you also mentioned a social and moral responsibility for your university to partner with the community. I want to talk a little bit more about that because, obviously, JCSU is a historic institution in Charlotte. Let's talk a little bit about some of those community and corporate partnerships, some that were existing and some that you're hoping to either reignite or begin fresh in your leadership.
That's a great way to talk deeply about community engagement. And I want to say that community engagement is probably one of the most important things that I think I bring back to this university. And so the university, founded in 1867, founded by freed Black people when other universities in this country were not allowing us entrance into their doors, into their university spaces. And so here's Johnson C. Smith, founded in order to have this obligation that we fulfill the promise of higher education for Black people. And now that I'm here and I walk around campus, I talk with students, faculty, staff, administrators, and families in particular. I talk with community partners, and then I say to myself, how is it that we can be innovators and educational leaders who set a path for how people have access into higher education to study, to learn, but then to graduate and go into jobs and careers that will propel them for lives that are, we probably sometimes think we can't have. When I think about community engagement, I think about our historic West End partners. I think about the Knight Foundation that has poured so much into what we are doing here at Johnson C. Smith University. I think about the internships that we have and that we should have at places like Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Atrium Health. But I also want to think about what does it mean to be in community spaces that are primarily and historically Black? And how do we cultivate the residents in those spaces to come onto our campus to study, teach, and learn with us, and then for them to be a part of our academic journeys? I think community engagement has to include the very people who live around the universities who oftentimes are not embraced or invited in. And I'm inviting them in. And I want them to be in with me, with our students. And it's about building a social movement that's inclusive and diverse and full of equity.
I like that. Social, inclusive, diverse, and full of equity. And I want to actually jump backward a little bit because um, I just hear your vision is so clear for all the things that you're doing and aim to do. How did you develop your leadership skills and your leadership style? This is intriguing to me.
I've been thinking about that a lot, and I've gone to many leadership institutes. I've participated in HERS and ACE. I've led NCTE, which is the National Council of Teachers of English, as its president, and now I'm past president. I have engaged in lots of equity and diversity institutes and trainings. But I will tell you, your question about where does my leadership style come from? I have to say that it comes from where I'm from. It comes from Charleston. It comes from watching all of these Black educators from the time I was in kindergarten until I graduated from high school, and having Black educators who always presented themselves in ways where they said and taught me that you can do anything that you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And you cannot be limited by other people's limitations that they impose on you. And so my leadership sense, my leadership stance, and my leadership style comes from all the Black people in Charleston, South Carolina, who may not have had opportunities to become the 15th president of Johnson C. Smith, but who actually always walked with grace and who stood on integrity and who always believed that if you see something that's wrong in the world, it is your responsibility to interrupt it and to work on behalf of other people. I think about my leadership style more so these days because people ask me about it. And I believe it goes back to how I was raised. I'm a listener. I'm a critical listener. I hear the things that people say that other people might not want to pay attention to. I feed back to those people what I think they've said in order for us to then have dialogue. But I also am patient in terms of who are you and how might we learn about each other in order for us to work on productive change with each other for an institution, for a community, for the world. And my leadership style is definitely embedded in who I am and how I think about the world. But it comes from Black folks in Charleston, and it comes from Black women feminist thinkers and writers like Bell Hooks and Toni Morrison, who say that if you see something in the world, you got to improve it in order to actually have a world that we pass on to other people. And that's my leadership style.
Thank you for sharing that. And I love that it has been built upon seeing the resilience of beautiful Black people in Charleston, our home state of South Carolina, and also your family upbringing. And you also mentioned Black feminist poets. Let's talk a little bit about the role and importance of women, specifically in leadership, and Black women. What's the importance of having mentors and peer circles of women, particularly in the leadership role that you have, leading an entire HBCU?
An entire HBCU. You're right about that. Black women in particular, have always supported me. And when I think about mentors, I can name so many Black women who poured into me. Having mentors, that is really important for how we actually think about the work, how we understand that we're not the only one leading it, and how we have a group of supporters. I have other Black women presidents, and we have a sister circle. We text each other regularly. They're presidents of other HBCUs in this country. And we share similar stories, and we oftentimes have different approaches, and that's really important. I see that group as a mentoring group, and I think it's really important because I am reminded on a daily basis that the work that I do is not an isolation of the work that other Black women have historically done and the work current Black women are doing today. So having mentors, having a network system, being able to think aloud and brainstorm aloud with other people about, if I want to change the world, how do I start at Johnson C. Smith University? How are other people trying to change the world? And how can we build coalitions and really think deeply about mentorship with other people? I want my students here at JCSU to not just see me as their 15th president. I want them to see me as someone who cares about them, someone who is mentoring them, even if they're not calling me their mentor, someone who listens deeply. Because if I do that for them, they will go out and mentor other people when they leave Johnson C. Smith. And ultimately, that's the goal. So mentors, mentorship are fundamentally important.
I love to hear that. Not only about the mentorship, but that you have a peer circle of other sister circles, women college presidents. If we just kind of look at the numbers and step back a bit, of the nation's roughly, just over 100 historically Black colleges and universities, how many are led by women?
Wow, that's a great question. There's a handful led by women. I think my peer circle has about 12 of us. And, we're talking about HBCUs here. And so I am a private HBCU in the city of Charlotte in North Carolina. And so I'm a part of the United Negro College Fund schools. And we have about 37 schools that are private that are part of the UNCF network. And we're seeing a growing number of these universities becoming institutions led by Black women, you know, and so I think it's important. I think that for too long, we have been denied these opportunities to be leaders when we are leaders, when we are the people, in my opinion, who've actually given the ideas, who've innovated, who've been creative. And so now we're seeing more Black women rightfully become presidents. Yesterday it was just announced the new president of Winston-Salem State University is a Black woman. I couldn't be more excited. And so how do we cultivate that more? And how do we understand that Black women have always been about collaboration and not competition? Black women leaders have always been about supporting communities as opposed to tearing them down. And Black women we've always had a blueprint for what freedom and liberation can look like. And now to be leaders of institutions, I just think that that's important.
Very, very important. Absolutely important. And you're right. There are only a handful that come to mind in terms of women leading these historic institutions. So my hats go off to each of you and the work that you do every day. Let's talk a little bit about Johnson C. Smith University in Charlotte, North Carolina. Tell us a little bit about your school, your campus, student enrollment, some of the degrees offered, and kind of what some of the opportunities are for you as going into your second year as president of JCSU.
Wow, you know what? When I hear that, going into my second year as president, who would have thought this little Black girl from the South would go to Johnson C. Smith University and one day turn around and become its 15th president? I am the second woman president of this entire institution. And the first woman president is was the amazing Dr. Dorothy Kauser-Yancey, who was the president when I was a student here, and someone who I keep in touch with and who provides me yet again with the mentorship that we were talking about. So I do want to acknowledge that I am the second Black woman president, the second woman president of this institution. And the first is Dorothy Kauser-Yancey. And so when I think about Johnson C. Smith, I think about everything that I observed in Dr. Yancey. I think about the history. I think about the types of academic offerings that we need to have. And I also think about who should be here and who needs to be represented in conversations, and they're not. So we were founded in 1867. We became Johnson C. Smith University in the 1920s by name. And since then, we have had various academic programs. We are an undergraduate and a master's granting institution. We have a master's in social work. Some of our programs include business administration, STEM areas, the liberal arts, esports, everything that you can imagine. My hope is that we have this transformative agenda. And so maybe a couple of years ago, the mayor decided to raise monies and support areas of need. And one of the areas of need became transformation in education. And so after the murder of Mr. George Floyd Jr. in 2020, there was this push to think deeply about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Johnson C. Smith University has always been a leader in those areas. So the mayor came up with the Mayor's Racial Equity Initiative that awarded millions of dollars to Johnson C. Smith University to engage in transformation. We are Charlotte's only HBCU, and we have about 1,120 students. That enrollment will increase. And we support students from a variety of backgrounds and educational experiences right here at 100 Beatties Ford Road. Our history is a storied history. It's one that's layered with complexities when it comes to Black survival and also Black resilience. And today we sit, I would say on the tallest space in the city of Charlotte. And sitting where we are able to think about the entire community of Charlotte, but we're also able to think about how do we make connections between our academic curriculum and what students are interested in when it comes to their social lives, and how do we actually make sense of connecting with the political and the social. And so that's who we are, and that's what we do here at Johnson C. Smith.
Love to hear connecting the political and the social. That's really important. And
Yeah.
love to hear that Dr. Yancey, you're right, the first woman president at JCSU, was the president when you were a student. That's really cool. And that you keep in touch today. She's one of your mentors. That's really exciting. Got to know her in my work with UNCF. For many years. So that's really, really exciting. So, listen, Dr. Kinlock, something that I know is very important to you. You talked earlier about Black feminist authors and poets, and you are an author and poet yourself. You, in fact, have a passion and extensive studies and degrees in English, literature, African American literature. Tell us about your passion for English and the value of literacy in Black communities today.
Oh, I love stories. I grew up listening to stories. I grew up writing stories. I never thought that I could actually write stories for a living. And I always wrote stories. And so when I went away to Detroit, Michigan to get my master's and then my PhD, it was all about exploring ideas and stories. Literacy has always been important to me. Literature has always been important to me. And I would say the value of thinking deeply about who I am as a leader is directly connected to who I am as a writer, as a scholar, but more importantly, as a critical thinker. When we talk about stories, we have to think about the human experience. We have to think deeply about who people are with themselves and in relation to other people. And that's what stories, that's what literature, that's what literacies do for me. It also allows me to think about how do I understand what's written with what's spoken, with what's not spoken. It's the silences in between that we oftentimes never account for that are just as powerful as the words on a page. And so for me, I am a writer, and I write the stories that I want or wanted to read when I was younger and didn't have access to. I work with communities of people. I think about how they understand place, how they understand race, how they understand struggle, and then how they make sense of making a way sometimes out of no way. And documenting those stories for me are important. Now, if I connect that to my leadership at Johnson C. Smith, I'm back here because it's about the stories of Black folks and other peoples of color in this country who might not always have access to other types of institutions. How do we tell those stories, and how do we give them a roadmap for saying, you can dream and you can have those dreams materialize into reality? And then you can tell your story as connected to a larger picture about the human race, the human condition. And so stories are really important to me.
Love that. And you're continuing the storytelling by writing your own in this chapter, entering your second year as the 15th president of Johnson C. Smith University, Dr. Valerie Kinloch. So excited that you were able to have this conversation with us today. And of course, before we wrap here at Black Enterprise, we're always, wanting to know, you talked a little bit about career pathways for students. We also want to know about fundraising plans. What are some of your plans for the vision of fundraising for this historic HBCU in Charlotte, North Carolina?
Oh, now that is an important question. And I would say, HBCUs historically have been underfunded in this country. And when we talk about private HBCUs, that's another topic all in and of itself. Sure. But I would say some of the fundraising efforts and initiatives have already included I will admit that I just turned 50 in January.
Congratulations. 50 and fabulous, might we add. Like 50 where? First of all,
Thank
50 where?
you. And when I took this job, I knew that I would be in this job and I would turn 50 in January. And so one of the fundraising campaigns, instead of getting birthday gifts, instead of people wanting to take me out, I asked if I could have at least 50 people make a contribution and a certain amount of money to our President's Gap Scholarship Fund. My goal was on January 30th, which is my birthday, I wanted to raise $50,000 to support our students who have a need, and who might not be able to stay here. So, I set out the goal for 50,000, got a group of women together for lunch, raised about $162,000 for students and for scholarships. That was really important. If we could do that, and that's 160,000, then what might we be able to do if we're thinking about a comprehensive capital campaign? And so fundraising is important. We are seeking partnerships. We are always seeking supporters. We have various needs here, from facilities to reimagining our academic programs. But more importantly, if I have a student who needs financial clearance, there is no way that I cannot do something to support that student. A student who decides to come to Johnson C. Smith University, and if the only reason they might not return is because of financial hardships, then we have to figure out how to better support our students, how to raise money, and how to think about philanthropy in very creative ways. My goal is to ensure that people who want to be here have access to being here, and financial burden should not prevent them from getting a high quality education. So we have lots of goals and priorities for our comprehensive capital campaign once it starts. It hasn't started yet, but along the way, we have alumni who are engaging in donations and campaigns. And it's just really excited to see our National Alumni Association and our alumni give back to this university. I think this is the year that we've seen an increase in alumni donations and contributions, and I'm hoping to go with that even more.
Wonderful, wonderful, one remarkable. Congratulations on exceeding your birthday goal, and also, letting this be a catalyst and building block toward the larger capital campaign. We've seen you've done it already, so we know you will continue to succeed. Dr. Valerie Kinloch, before we go, what are your daily words to live by?
You know what? My daily words to live by. I'm going to talk about June Jordan, poet, educator, scholar, activist, advocate. And June Jordan tells us that she tells us so many things. But one of the things is she's never met a stranger. And the things that she does in the dark, she does in the light. Mm-hmm. And if you are on the same page, then join us in this mission to engage in revolutionary and radical change and transformation. I live by the words of transformation. I live by change. I live by turning possibilities into realities and building coalitions with other people. And if we can do all of those things, and if we can do those things through a lens of love and care, we could live fundamentally in a better world that understands how we are all interconnected, and Black excellence is, for me, the most significant thing that I think about every single day.
Black excellence. Well, you are living Black excellence indeed. Listen, Dr. Valerie Kinloch, we've been so excited to have you here on Classes in Session. Thank you so much for your time, and congrats as you enter your second year as president at JCSU.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate this. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Honored to have you. And for folks watching, be sure to share this episode with friends, with colleagues, especially with students and alum of JCSU and any of your friends in Charlotte and the Carolinas. We want to definitely support this historic institution in Charlotte, North Carolina. Honored to be here with Dr. Valerie Kinloch. She's an author, a poet, a scholar. She's worked in higher ed administration in several universities across major cities, and now she is back at her alma mater to lead the institution, Johnson C. Smith University. So again, thank you all for tuning in. Stay posted for the latest and greatest on Black Enterprise's social media channels and on our website at blackenterprise.com. For this edition of Class is in Session, I'm your host, Ashley Stevens, and class is dismissed.